Hi viewers, this is Salahuddin with lecture number 4. Uh, in the first part of this topic, we talked about the circumstances. In the second part, we talked about the measures. In the third part of the same, we talked about the impacts. In this final and fourth part, we will talk about the results of the personal rule of George III. Uh, George III's reigns uh, composed of these four parts. In these four parts, we have covered all the aspects of George III. And the reign of George III carries great significance as well as great importance in the history of England. So today we will be dealing the fourth part and coming to the point, the topic, results of the personal rule of George III. Uh, what were the results of George III's reign? So these four important uh, results that we will talk about in detail. The first part is the loss of 13 American colonies. The second part is incentive to bribery and corruption. The third part is the personal rule paved the way for democracy. And the fourth result, new form of the party system. So the results, these were the outcomes which were come out as a result of the personal rule of George III. Uh, so coming to the first result, loss of 13 American colonies. The American colonies, those 13 American colonies, they were under the rule of the Great Britain. Those were the colonies of the Great Britain, those 13 colonies. In the coming part, we will talk about in detail all those 13 colonies. So how those colonies were lost? The first and the most important point is these 13 colonies were not lost all of a sudden. It was a slow and a gradual process, and finally culminated into the loss of those colonies, and America got independence in 1776. So what is the significance of those 13 colonies? Those 13 colonies, they were of great interest for the England. They could find raw materials there. They could import and export raw materials from there. So it was a really a very significant house for the labor force. And because of those 13 American colonies, the English greatly advanced in many in the economic as well as in other field or walks of life. Because the labor force was very cheap there, the raw materials could be found very easily there, and they could easily import and export those raw materials among those 13 American colonies. So the economy of the Great Britain was completely relying on those 13 American colonies, though they had other colonies as well in other part of the world, like in Africa, the Sudan, and some other parts in the Boers, as well as in the subcontinent, and then in the Canada, in North America. They had also colonies in the far East Asia, the Australian continent. New Zealand was also their colony. So all these colonies were also there, but these 13 American colonies were of really great significance for the England. So George III, how those colonies were lost? Jartri received no help from his countrymen, because uh, uh, people from his country, they were really got fed up from his personal rule. His personal rule converted into an arbitrary rule, which people could not bear anymore. So the lack of support from the countrymen resulted in the loss of 13 American colonies. And we are not going in detail on the causes of the loss of the 13 American colonies, which is really a different topic, but we are talking about the results of the personal rule of George III, that is the loss of the American colonies. The second result was the incentive to bribery and corruption. Uh, how bribery, corruption, and other malpractices become norm of the day during the reign of George III. Uh, Even though in the reign of George III, the Whig was practicing these evil practices also, but now George III had started practicing those malpractices of the Whig. Thus, it paved the way for the bribery and incentive, bribery, titles, and dispensing of natural resources for gaining the support of the people. So all these malpractices were started by George III in order to gain support in the parliament. So uh, it paved way for the bribery and corruption. So corruption and bribery and other malpractices become norm of the day during the reign of George III. So this is the second result of George III's reign. The third result is the personal rule paved the way for democracy. When George III turned into in a kind of, an arbitrary rule, people got fed up, and people start raising voice against him, and they took George III as James I or James II, and earlier those of James I, Charles I. Now it was the time which was completely revolutionized. Agriculture revolution had taken place, industrial revolution had taken place. uh, like it was not in a full swing, but the situations were made and the condition were quite harmonious for those revolution, and agriculture revolution was a bit more in full swing as compared to industrial revolution. So as a result of those revolutions, it had really advantage economically the people, and the people got right to buy books, and printing press had already revolutionized the minds of the people, and they could share ideas, and they could express their ideas through pen and through paper. So the new ideas, the ideas of democracy and the rights. So these new ideas started getting a place in the minds of the people. They would talk about against the arbitrary rule of George III. They would talk about the democracy, and the writing, especially of some philosophers like Fox, Cathens, and Voltaire. Some those were really great writers who talked about democracy. So the writings and the new ideas, the parliamentary reforms, these all in one paved the way for democracy. The fourth important result, a new form of the party system developed or arose. Uh, Earlier, the Whig Party was in power. Even George III would not like the Whig Party, but due to Walpole, but the wife of Jaratri had some kind of soft corner for the Walpole, due to which the Whig party remained in power even in the reign of George III. So the Whig party was, as we talked in the in the past in the start, that the Whig party was the party of landlords, and the Whig party was the party of middle class people and those of the servants. But they had started practicing those evil practices in the form of bribery, corruption, titles. Uh, Despite all those practices, the Whig party, to in order to gain support in the parliament, now now George III had started those practices in place of the Whig party, and he had formed a new faction in the parliament, which was called the New Whiggism, and the New Whiggism was also based on the principles, the rules, which were more benevolent or more kind to people. So they had a kind of thing in mind that the grievances of the people could be addressed properly. So this new Whiggism again inculcated a ray of hope in the minds of the people. And then in the fifth part, we will talk about the conclusion of George III. So we will talk about all the very prominent part or the prominent events of the George III's reign and the conclusion by paraphrasing the introduction in some different words. So today we winded up the George III. In the next part, we will talk about those revolution or some other topics which we will talk about in detail. So thank you so much for watching the video, and if there is any question, you must ask in the comment section. So thank you so much.